Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Livestream Conversation sponsored by Own Your Judaism. My name is Moish Steigman, aka The Mindful Rabbi, and I am thrilled and excited to welcome today Jon Costa. In addition to my work through Own Your Judaism, I am also the rabbi of a synagogue in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I am completing my 5th year there, and I will share Jon's bio in just a moment. But Jon has also been a longtime member, a longtime board member, a past president. So Jon, thank you for all of your service and everything you have done for the synagogue up in Green Bay. And thank you for joining me today. Jon was born in Baltimore, Maryland. His father was a chemical engineer and a rocket scientist. His mother, a speech therapist. Jon has one brother and had one sister. Both sides of his family have been in the United States multiple generations. His great-grandfather served in the Civil War at age 15 and claimed to have held Lincoln's hat during the Gettysburg Address. And he was one of the last living Civil War veterans. Jon presently resides in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He has lived in 7 states, 19 cities, and in Israel on Kibbutz Urim. He holds a BS degree in environmental science studies from San Jose State University. He served in the Israeli Defense Forces as a paratrooper from 1970 to 1973. He has been a builder for much of his life, building homes of his own design. He holds multiple construction licenses. He has 2 wonderful children and a dog named Jack. Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully today.
Excellent, excellent. You know, normally as part of this, something you don't know, Jon, because I did not do this with you, is normally, 3-4 days before, I send my guest a list of possible questions for discussion. And it's not an interview. Like, these are not questions that are going to be asked. It's just a way to kind of stimulate conversation and get the ideas flowing. I did not do that with you because despite your rich history and your rich background, I want to jump into your book right away. Jon published his first book just about a year ago. I don't know the exact publishing date. You can let me know. Before I do that, Jon, I do have one question for you.
Okay.
And I know I've asked you before, and either the answer didn't land, or when I Google searched your book, which is available on Amazon, by the way, when I Google searched your book, it just came up again as another question. What's your name? I've seen Jon Costa. This is like the worst thing a rabbi can ask like a congregant for 5 years and have been a president. But I've seen Jon Costa. I've seen Jonathan Costa. I've seen Jonathan DeCosta. I've seen Jonathan Ben DeCosta.
Okay.
I don't know if this is part of your paratrooper spy experience, if they're aliases. So.
We'll leave any spying experience off to the side.
Okay.
My American name is Jonathan Ben Costa. The Costa family, per our family tradition, goes back as far as Portugal. And if we were Portuguese, it would have been da Costa. So when I made Aliyah to Israel, when you make Aliyah to Israel, you get to basically modify, change your name. And so I added the "duh" back to Costa. All right. Some of my ancestors have used da Costa as stage names.
Oh.
Okay. Harry DaCosta wrote The Tiger Rag. Okay. So he used that name. All right. So in his honor and in his honor of the past family, I use DaCosta when I'm writing.
Got it. So wait, your U.S. legal name is Jonathan Ben Costa?
Yes.
And is that kind of like when in German you have like a von something? Is it a Ben in that sense, or it's a middle name, or it's
a Ben named after a grandfather Benedict.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I had always been referring to you as Jon Costa. So legally it's Jon Ben Costa, and your author name in tribute and honor to your ancestors is Jonathan DaCosta, and your name in Israel is Jonathan DaCosta.
Right.
Excellent. That in and of itself could be another book, I would imagine, right? Just like
No,
the,
no.
the story of your ancestors and your family and how each of the names, where each of the names come from.
It could be, but that's
Okay.
not the type of thing I write.
All right. Well, the type of thing you do write is a book called The Children of Noah, A Coven Tale by Jonathan da Costa, right? We have the "da" right in there. Jonathan da Costa. I mentioned I did a Google search just to be sure it is available on Amazon. Have you read the reviews, by the way, John?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. You know what? Here we go. Hold on one moment. I'm going to do this right now. I should have popped this up ahead of time. We're going to go through the reviews right now. When I searched yesterday, John, there were 3 reviews.
Okay.
One was a 3-star review with no comment or no anything. There were 2 5-star reviews. One which was an anonymous Amazon customer who says, "Great story. Keep the story going. Love the twists and turns." That was in December of 2021.
Okay.
Another review was from almost exactly 3 months ago on January 5th. Do you know someone named Marty Wisdom?
Marty Wisdom. Marty Wisdom is my second wife.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. So Marty wrote, and this is such a beautiful, beautiful review. She wrote, this book is a treasure trove. And again, this is just in January. "This is one of the rare books I will read a second time. It operates on so many levels. Gobble it up for the edge of your seat thriller of a plot. Read it again for the cast of characters. Read it for its many history lessons. Read it for its insights into cultures around the world. Read it for its eye-opening trove of information about Jews and Judaism. Read it for the thousands of random facts that can take you down a rabbit hole if you choose to investigate them. I guess I will be reading it more than twice. I can't wait for the next book by this author. Until then, I'll be rereading this one, making sure I've uncovered all the treasures it contains." So that's a lovely review.
Yeah, I'm flattered. I'm flattered beyond belief.
Wonderful. So this is the first book that you've published, correct?
It is the first book that I published. Book 2 will be going online hopefully by the end of the day.
Amazing, amazing. What's it going to be called?
Book 2 is called The Wall.
The Wall.
As in the Great Wall of China. Okay. And it is a sequel to the first book. Book 3 is also done, but is not through editing yet.
Got it. Do you have a title for that book yet?
That I'm still working on the title. It could be the Brethren of the Brotherhood.
Ooh.
So,
okay. The Children of Noah. How did you start writing this book? Where did it come from?
Okay, this came out of some frustration, some thinking. I have a mind which divulges, it searches down into the math of things very often. And one of the constant puzzles that I was always dealing with is, why do things like the SAT scores that our children have are constantly sliding? And it's not just the educational process. I decided to come up with a theory that maybe the amount of intelligence available in the universe is not as available to them. So this brought forth a totally wild science fiction type theory in my mind that maybe intelligence is a limited resource. Okay, and just like we tap into spirituality through our lives, through our religions, etc. Maybe the spirituality of intelligence is there, but there's only so much of it. So that gave me the impetus for a short story. So it sat on my desktop for about 3 or 4 years. My brother writes books also, and he finally convinced me to go ahead and write a book. So I went to Israel about 2 years ago, got caught in the COVID quarantine, spent 2 weeks in a lovely hotel in Jerusalem, and I wrote. So that's where it started, and I've been writing ever since.
Wow. I want to come back to the writing process because yours also was quite fascinating of how you got to publishing a book, because it seems different from what I hear from most authors. So you called it the cosmic intelligence quota, right? That's what you
Yeah.
named it in the book. And this is your own theory, because I Google searched that as well when I was reading the book, and nothing came up.
No, it is an outlandish individual theory. It's not like if I was writing about time travel. There are hundreds of time travel books. If I'm writing about the end of the world, there are hundreds of end of the world books. No, this was my own totally off the wall theory.
So, and this is a compliment. I will tell you, when I read the book and when the idea of the cosmic intelligence quota first came up, this is a compliment. It seemed plausible enough that I had to think, is this real, or is this Jon's imagination? Is this one of those things that's just kind of an under the radar conversation that I have yet to be attuned to? So I Googled it while I was reading the book, which is a testament to you. Yeah.
Not there. Yeah. Now, if you Google other things in my book, all the historical numbers that I use, all of the historical events that I use, I research. So if I say that, there was a plague and it happened at such and such a date and it took out this many people, that's what happened. At least that's the history that I was able to find.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the process. You just brought up some of the research process. How much time and effort did you put into this? How much did you have to learn or teach yourself in order to write this? Did you have a narrative that you wanted one of the characters to share and you had to backfill, or is this just a fountain of wealth and information that you've accumulated?
It's a process, and it's a process that is continually evolving. Okay. I found that when I started to write, I had to create characters for my story. And so, my first character is on my first page. And he is an amalgam of multiple people in my life. There's a little bit of my brother, a little bit of me, a little bit of a teacher here, a rabbi there, whatever. And so as I started writing, the characters, when I needed a new character, I would name them and I'd start writing. And as you're writing, you start to describe. And as you describe, the character starts to come alive. And this is wonderful in some ways, but not in others. I become so involved with my characters that I don't want them to die, which means that I'm going to have to just keep on writing books with these same characters. Now, if I write all my books with the same characters for the rest of my life, life is going to be boring. So I do have to eventually put some of them on the shelf.
Wow.
But it's writing is an interesting process. I didn't learn to write. I didn't take any courses in writing. Unknown caller. Hold on. For some people, that will be obvious. Okay. For other people, it will be refreshing. The people and plots that you write about have to come out of your experience in life. And as I write, I use my experiences. As I create and then then look into history of things, then I go, oh, gee, I need to examine this further. To give you an example, in the third book, one of the major characters is Judith. Judith, is a pre-Maccabee biblical, not quite making the Bible character. And I was investigating antique menorahs, saw an antique menorah that had a statue of Judith on it from a museum in Germany.
Wow.
And I started to investigate Judith. And I said, oh, she is a character. I love this character. And so she's a big part of my third book.
Wow, that's remarkable. So some of these characters are amalgams of people that you know. And in this case, this was just something that captivated you? This
This is
menorah in a museum, maybe was it in
right.
Germany,
Uh-huh.
with this Judith character, and you just had to bring this character to life in your book.
Right. So, I saw the menorah, I saw the character, I researched Judith, I researched her history and, tales about her, both in Judaism and Christianity. And I just said, okay, this character is too good not to bring alive.
Wonderful.
So she has been brought alive in book number 3.
Wonderful. I will say, for off the record, if it's a compliment or not a compliment that I did or didn't make part of one of the characters. So I will say that as an off the record question. But
Okay.
So I love that you're bringing in people from your life, and you talked about your own history. You can't read The Children of Noah without seeing your Jewish influence, the influence of your time in Israel. Would you talk more about how central those are, not to you, to your book? What came first? Was this an idea of you wanted something to express your Judaism and your time in Israel through writing, or did you want to write a book? And since you said you have to write about yourself, this is just what came up.
The start of my book had nothing to do, in my mind, with my Judaism. Okay. And it wasn't an aim of my writing to express it. But as I wrote, it's me. So I couldn't help but make that a part of my book. And starting the book off writing in Jerusalem, I mean, come on, you can't help but be influenced by this. And so all my books are influenced by my life, by the places that I've lived, by my experiences, by people I've met, and now by people I haven't met. People I haven't met have become, alive for me, which is maybe a poor, influence, but, I have all these friends that only live on pages.
It's wonderful, but that's what you want for a reader to say too, right? You want someone to read a book, you and any author, but you want someone to read your book and feel a connection with your characters, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons you're going to keep turning the page. You want to know what happens to them, invested in them. I would imagine all the more so you're going to be invested in them because you created them, and in some ways you hold their. In some ways, the story is going to determine their fate, but you also hold their fate in your hands. It's
yeah, and quite frankly, there's one specific character that at the end of one book I killed off, and then I had to go back and edit the book because I didn't want to kill her off. So I had to edit and change the ending of the book so that she still lived.
Wow.
So it's all a process. It's fun. I wrote these things for people to have fun with. There are things to think about. There are subjects to ponder. I tried not to be political because, if I was political, that would date the whole thing. But at the same time, I tried to throw in a tweak here and there to get people to question things.
Well, again, from my experience, I know two things. On the one hand, it was an easy read in that I was able to keep turning the pages. I know, if you look at some of the authors from, Russian or French authors from 150, 200 years ago, early American authors, you have 17 semicolons in every sentence and you have to read a paragraph 5 times, right? So in that sense, it was highly readable. That being said, I couldn't just flip through it, right? I certainly had to pause. I had to think, wait, what is Jon saying here? There's something here he wants me to get. I need to read it the second, sometimes the third time to really unpack what he's trying to say. That sounds like what you were hoping for.
It is what I was hoping for. And my second book is much more action-packed. Okay. People who have read it, who've helped me editing, go, this is all action. And I'm going, that's pretty much that. The third book is much more thinking about things. And so far, the 2 people who've read the third book both say it's better than 1 and 2, which is good. I'm growing.
Great. And this started as I guess it started as a short story. Then it became one book. Then as you were writing or finishing one book, you realized the story was going to be larger, and then it became three books. Is that right?
It's become three books. Now I am working on a fourth book, but the fourth book is connected to, but the third book really ends the majority of the story. The fourth book starts a new chapter in the world.
So this is going to be a Star Wars franchise, right? Where you have the 9 movies and you have all these spin-offs with connected.
Yeah, no franchises here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk more a little bit about your writing process. So, the couple of times I've spoken with an author, it's been the kind of, sometimes they lock themselves in a room and they beat their heads against the wall. It takes hours. You tear up copies, you start over, you sit at a computer, nothing comes out. So you go take a walk. It sounds like it was a different process for you.
Okay. There's a physical process. There's a mental process. The physical process is I've dedicated that this is something I do every morning. All right. Now, I don't say I do it from 8:30 till 9:46.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I'm not that scheduled a person, but I try to work on it every morning. When I go to sleep at night, thinking about how does this progress? Where am I going? What am I doing with this? Does this even make sense? And so that process is during the night. And when I get up in the morning, I'm ready to hopefully sit down and write. Sitting down and writing means at least taking the last 2 or 3 days' work and editing it. So I read through, make sure that it's flowing right, make sure that, my language does not necessarily work well when I type it down. I read it and I go, oh my God, that's terrible. I can't even figure out what I'm saying. Okay. And so I have to edit those things. I have to make sure that my characters stay in character, that, things work out. And after going through the last few days of writing, then I'll start writing again. Now, I've talked to other authors and editors, and they'll say, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 words per day is sort of average. Well, 500 words is 2 pages. So if you're writing a 300-page book, that's 150 days. All right. There'll be some days when I'll go through, I'll read everything, I'll write something, I'll delete it, I'll write again, I'll delete it, and the whole day's work is a semicolon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There'll be other days when I just tune in and I'm having so much fun with a character, with a situation, with a scene, whatever, that I'll write 2,000 words. Okay. Now, I am not one of these people who will sit down and write for 16 hours. And I know of authors like that. I've read about authors like that. One of the authors that I read for fun as a kid was Thorne Smith. And Thorne Smith, the Topper series. Topper takes okay. You're too young. Okay, fine. Thorne Smith wrote during the Depression. Okay. And some of his books, supposedly, he wrote in 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Full novels?
Full novels.
Wow.
And very creative.
Wow.
And very ribald. They're hysterical. I mean, they have wonderful senses of humor. I don't ever think that I'll ever write like that. Okay. I write, I get up, I walk around. I write, I get up, I have a sandwich. I write, I get up, I take my dog for a walk. I write, I get up, have another cup of coffee. In one of my introductions, I say, the reason that my chapters are the way they are is because I have ADHD. I can't just concentrate on one thing. I'm concentrating on lots of different things. And lots of things in the book, there are all sorts of parallel paths that eventually come together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the way my mind works.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I want to talk a little bit about the book and also a little bit more about some of the Jewish influences. But I'd love you, Jon, to present the book. Like, what's the book about? I don't want to put any spoilers out there that you wouldn't want me to reveal. So why don't you share the book, you present the book, and we'll play off that rather than me potentially putting out a big reveal or a spoiler for those who haven't read it.
Okay, I'll try to do a bit of a synopsis.
Great.
So that people can get an idea. And I actually, just with book number 2 being published now, wrote a synopsis so that people who've read book 1 and it's been a year before they read 2 can get up to speed. Basically, the book focuses on that there's a group in the world. There's a group in the world that is mindful of the fact that there's only a certain amount of intelligence to go around. And the intelligence is increasing in the world, just like the universe is expanding. The universe, all our theories now say the universe is expanding. Well, if the universe is expanding, so is the intelligence. But the universe is expanding at a fixed rate. What happens if our population takes a huge spike? Well, there's not as much intelligence per person to go around that they can tap onto. So per my book, a group in Iran, home of the mathematicians of the world, figures this out 2,500 plus years ago. And they decide that, hey, this is neat, this is interesting, this is a great theory, but if we have too many people in the world, they're not going to be very smart. So they start working on ways to limit the population. All right, so we could call them the evil people, or maybe they're not. Okay, maybe they're the practical people in this story. But there are other people in the world in our current day that are looking at the cycles of life and looking at the things in history. And one of the things that people use for reviewing history is called a timeline. Timelines, you plot out, you see what happens. Well, when a mathematician starts looking at a timeline, he can start to see, hey, things are going up and down in a certain pattern. Things are happening in patterns. And so a few people start to realize that there are patterns going on that are not random. There are patterns going on that have been influenced by somebody or something. And I'll leave the plot there.
Great. So it's this intersection of a group of people who 2,500 years ago realized that intelligence is limited and does not grow proportionally to the rate of growth of the population, right? And there's a modern day group of people disconnected from the first group who's starting now looking at the span of human history to recognize these, not anomalies, but almost these seemingly things that don't fit into the pattern of
right.
life, and starting to ask questions. And this becomes the convergence of those stories.
Exactly.
And this is really a character-centered book, right? In other words, we learn everything through these little snapshots of things that happen to and around characters, right? This is, yeah.
It's character-centered, but there are a lot of characters. Mm-hmm. This is not a book with a hero. Mm-hmm. This is not a book centered around, like Jack Reacher. This is not a book centered around one place, one instant, or one person. There are teams of people. There are groups of people. The people have personalities. They have differences in the way they look at the world. They look at history. They look at everything else. And it's an intersection of all those things. It's also one of the things that I tried to portray in the book is people's changing their viewpoints when they get more knowledge. And one of my characters in the book is ALK, ALK. I'm just going to use those three initials because it's a shortening of a very long historical name. He's named after a historical mathematician. Okay. And he is he's Arab, he's Muslim Arab. He's assigned to his position by a mufti, and he is anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and as he's introduced to different people in different situations, he's forced to open his eyes. And in one case, if he hadn't have opened his eyes, he would have been dead. But he is evolving, and so part of the story is this is an evolution of time, concepts, and people.
Yeah, and he has to evolve multiple times. He has to at one point evolve everything he'd been conditioned to believe growing up, and then when he was he basically had to evolve in order to not die, and then continue to unfold around him. He then has to assess them with his own eyes. It's a remarkable capacity that AK has in order to be able to continually do this, both through the guidance of others and also through his own awareness and understanding of the world around him.
Right, and he's forced to re-examine his world and re-examine his perceptions. And actually, most people in this book are at one time or another are forced to re-examine their perceptions, which is part of what I feel is makes us whole, is constantly re-examining who we are, what's going on around us, and abandoning our preconceived notions.
When you were talking before that there's no central hero, it struck me, and I hadn't thought about this before, that almost all of the work in the book is collaborative. There's very, very, very little, aha, I figured it out.
Right.
All by myself. I'm going to lead the charge. Right. I mean, there are those aha moments that individuals have, but it's almost always within a kind of larger group conversation. And this seems to be centering collaborative conversation, learning, growth, exploration. Was that purposeful?
No.
Okay.
Because, quite frankly, I am very individualistic. I'm an introvert. I don't work well with others. I've had businesses, and in my businesses, I've tended to make them very small because I don't like large groups. But the whole situation here is there are so many things, so many sources of knowledge, so many different things happening, that there are groups that have to be, these are not individual decisions. These are not individual ahas, so that's how it evolved.
You said beforehand that this book did not start off as one with an intention of having a heavy Jewish influence or an Israeli culture influence. And as you said, you as an author call from your own experience in your own life. And these are the things about which you have tremendous knowledge and tremendous wealth of experience. What are some of the central experiences in your life, either your Jewish experience and or your time in Israel, that ended up being key inspirations, either for the character or for the plot or for the book as a whole?
Okay. That's a real difficult one, but needs to be gone through. So my experience when I went in, I left the country when I was 18. I was through with high school, and actually I was just through. This was before people started taking gap years, and I applied to multiple universities. not due to grades, but due to some really strange SAT and ACT scores. I was accepted to every place that I applied, and I decided to not go to any of them and take a year off. My father at the time was working in close to New York. I was in California. He was back and forth every 2 weeks. And I said, Dad, can you find me something to do in Israel? So he looked, and that was way before internet. And he went to the consulate in New York, and he got some information. And he said, well, you can do this program for $700, or you can do this program for $600, or this program for $650. But for $725, you can go for a whole year. And I said, sold. So I took a year off, went on a Habunim program working on a kibbutz, and loved it, loved the people, did not want to go back and start college yet. And so I went into the Israeli Defense Forces with a group. And that has influenced my entire life. Being forced to do things, physical things, to the point where you didn't think you could go forward, and going one more step, that is a life lesson. Being in a situation where you have to rely on others, that is a life lesson. Being in a situation where you don't understand what's going on around you, I mean, don't understand at all, that is an influencing situation. So that worked out well. It set a tone in my life. And so I came back. I got a degree in environmental studies, which was the in thing to do at the time, which also has colored my perspective of the world, of life, and everything else. So yes, I'm an environmentalist. Yes, I am an Israeli, pro-Israeli, not rabid Israeli, but very pro-Israeli. So that's who I am. That's where the perspective I wrote from. My Judaism has been something that's evolved over the years. I came from a very, very, very Reform background. As I indicated to you, Rabbi, we were so Reformed that my bar mitzvah was on a Friday night. I had no talis, no kippah, and we read from the Torah on Friday night. So, I mean, that's how Reformed we were. And one of the reasons I went to Israel was to really find more of my history, more of my culture, more of my Judaism.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, you're welcome.
As you were talking about, part of what you experienced in the Army is having to push physically past what you thought was your maximum point of exertion. Right? I see that in a lot of the characters. You have to push through mentally. Right? They have, they're not quite as much physically, at least in the first book, but certainly have to push through mentally through incredible exertion, wrapping their heads around things that they haven't thought about before and have to find capacity beyond that. In the Al-Kay character, pushing through preconceptions, right? Finding these kinds of resources. So I see that characteristic present throughout. And we talked also about the collaboration that the character needs to do, which is certainly a central part of your Army experience as well.
Right. Well, what I learned in the Army is that physical limitations are really mental limitations. Mm-hmm. Okay, you always have the ability to take one more step. There's always physical, somehow you can take the last bit of energy and make that step and still have another last bit of energy to make another step. And so the translation is, it's not physical. Mm-hmm. It's mental. The things that keep us from doing things in life are mental. They're not physical. And, there's, problems that I have, there's problems that other people have that are physical problems. And the damn thing is, just get over it.
Mm-hmm. I went to a chiropractor a number of years ago to help with back pain and to build up core muscle and all of those things. And one of the things he was saying at one point, and I forget the context of our conversation, is that when a person thinks they've reached their physical limit, their body usually still has 50% more capacity. We're like, we're tired, I'm exhausted, I can't go any farther, but the body still has 50% more. So that aligns with your idea that oftentimes the blocks to achievement, if they're physical, if they're the discipline to writing, they tend to be often mental, right? We tell ourselves that we don't have more capacity, but that capacity is often there.
I would go even further than that. I would not say 50%. I would say you always have 1% more.
There you go.
Not that you can feel totally wiped out, totally exhausted. If you can put the mental effort into it, there's 1% more. And very often that's what my characters are too. They're down to their last 1%.
I appreciate that there's always 1% more. It's not that the 50% is intimidating. It's that
I think it's overstating it. It makes it seem too easy.
It's achievable, right?
Yeah.
As wiped out as I am, as much as I feel like I'm at my limit, I can do 1%. Mm-hmm. And then there's still that one more 1%.
Exactly.
Right. And mathematically, that amount's going to diminish, right? Every time you take, there's a little bit.
You got it. You're a bit like a mathematician. Good.
Well, something I don't think you know about me, John, is I almost majored in math in college.
Really?
Yeah. My life might have been very, very different had I ended up majoring in math in college.
Well, then you probably appreciated the book even more. The fact that, they were going, oh, hey, maybe this is a way to look at this. This is a way to figure out the formulas for what's actually happening.
It did. It got my math brain activated, which I don't get to use quite as much as I'd like to.
Okay, fine. Yeah. I wish I had taken more higher math, but at the same time, if I had, this book could have been really dry.
Right. or you'd have been so compelled with the math that you'd have had to make the math central to the book.
Right.
I would have really engaged a bit more of a limited audience. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
My audience is limited enough. I didn't want to not limited.
Excuse me. Well, I think it's wonderful, and I've told you this. For me, the most important measure when I'm reading a book is when I'm done with a page. Am I eager and excited to read the next page? When I'm done with a chapter, there's always an excitement because I finished the chapter, but there's always a bit of oh no, the chapter's done, and I say I'm going to read a chapter or I'm going to read a few pages, and when I'm done with the pages, I simply wanted to keep reading. Right? I wanted to keep turning the page. I wanted to find an excuse to say, I'll start that project in 10 more minutes. I'm going to read a little bit longer.
Yeah.
That's really the highest praise I can give a book. I want to keep turning the pages and keep reading.
Thank you very much. So, and one of the reasons I explained that part of the reason that I made the book the way I did, which is, going back and forth between different scenarios, different scenes, etc. Most of the quote unquote chapters they can be a page long, but I don't think there's any more than 6 or 7 pages long.
And that's very few of them. And if I recall correctly, that's almost all toward the end of the book too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I made it so that, you could read and you could put it down. Yes. If you could put it down, you could put it down. Yep. But you could read and, okay, we're through with this person. We're through with this situation. Maybe I'll just take a look at the next line of the next chapter.
Exactly.
It's going to be
a paragraph. I'll just read the page and then boom, you've done that.
Yeah. So it's fun to do it that way.
Right. So, John, in addition to this being a wonderful read, is there any takeaway that you want people to have that they're going to come out of this and say, oh, what's the takeaway? What do you want? Is there a way you want to challenge people or inspire people?
Is there a takeaway? Well, the takeaway's in the 3rd book.
Okay. Nice plug. Very well done.
That's the takeaway in the 3rd book. But, the takeaway is we really have to examine the limits of the worlds that we live in. Okay. This comes from the environmentalist within me, that we have to understand that we are in a finite situation. And whether it is intelligence or whether it's resources or something else, we're in a finite world. Now, but in our minds, we have the infinite. So we have infinite possibilities. We have infinite ways to look at things, but we are constrained by the finite world around us. So, it's something to constantly re-examine. And one of the things that I re-examine throughout the books is don't take other people's words for what's going on. Don't go down the path of just following what's told. I mean, just so the SAT scores are going down. It's because, we're not teaching enough math. It's because we're not doing this. It's because the kids from the bad neighborhoods aren't having grocery stores close enough or not reading books, yada. There's always something else going on. Okay, and so this is a look at, hey, maybe there's other things going on. Maybe we need to look outside the box.
Well, thank you for that message. I love that message. I think there's one exception, though.
Which is?
To not taking things at face value. When I say this is a wonderful read and a wonderful story, that is the exception to Jon's takeaway. That one you can take at face value. But otherwise, thank you for that message. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. And the book that's going on Amazon now is called The Wall. Okay, and it's a bit more of a physical thriller. Great. So we'll see how people react to that. The last book is longer. It has some wonderful scenes in it, because I wrote it, a lot of it while I was in Israel for 5 months. And so there were visits to the Israeli museum that colored some of the things that I wrote. There were visits to various tells and various, hikes that I took that colored other things that I wrote. So it was fun.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for your time today, Jon, for sharing your story, for sharing the story. And thank you for all the time and energy and heart and passion that goes into writing a novel. And I am very, very excited to read book 2. And once again, this is The Children of Noah, written by Jonathan Costa. He published his book about a year ago. It is a wonderful, wonderful read. The second book in the series, The Wall, will be available today. Both of them are available on Amazon. And thank you so much again, Jon, for your time today, for sharing your story.
You're welcome. You have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.